All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to our first school board meeting of the year. So I'd like to call to order the King George County School Board regular meeting this evening. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. All right, and first up this evening, we will begin with a recognition by the King George Educational Foundation, Mr. Mark Bradshaw and Ms. Yvonne Richard.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for having us here. The King George Education Foundation is very proud to recognize our Space Camp winners and applicants for the summer 2022 scholarships to Space Camp. This year we'll be sending two students to summer camp in Huntsville, thanks to the generous donation of a new donor that I'll introduce you to in here in a second. So what we'd like to do is two-phase, recognize those new donors, and then I'll hand it over to Ms. Yvonne Richard, who's the chair of our selection subcommittee, and she will recognize the students that applied for all this and the winners from those and present them with certificates. So thank you very much for your time. We'd like to appreciate the opportunity to do this in public forum and appreciate the opportunity to serve King George County Schools. We're very proud to be part of what you have going here. So with that, let me introduce you to Mr. and Mrs. John Harrison. John and Brandy Harrison, please come forward. The Harrisons approached me last summer and said, you know, we really like what you're doing with Space Camp scholarships and we want to be a part of that. How do we do that? And I said, I can make that easy for you. Give me a check and we'll make it all happen. And that's what they did, by golly, and we did it. Our selection committee was able to double their workload in the selection process, but use the same process for selecting both candidates in ways that met the criteria for both the donors in there. So with significant and grateful appreciation, I'd like to recognize you two. Thank you very much for being a part of this program. We think it's very important to the youth of King George and the stimulation of STEM, interest in STEM in our schools. These scholarships have a ripple effect as they go out. It not only affects the winners, but it affects every person that applied for it. It affects siblings in that house, it affects their friends around. We have found other kids going to Space Camp that never heard of it before, but they're going now because they found out of it through this program. So we're generating a lot of interest in science and technology at the 5th grade level, which is critical for STEM overall, we have found. So we're very excited about this, and we hope to be able to continue doing this for a long time. So with that, John and Brandy, let me have, you can move a little better than I can.
Yes.
My wife, Sherry Bradshaw, will present him with the plaque.
Okay, good. All right, see you later. Huh? No, you go. You get something to drink. Get downstairs.
I'd also like to thank Yvonne for putting in countless hours of making this happen. All the extra hours beyond the committee work to make this work for us. And she did a fabulous job orchestrating the entire committee. We had 3 teachers, and we had myself and another senior retired engineer and my wife sitting on this particular selection panel. And we were impressed by all of those applicants, but I don't want to steal your thunder. I'll let you tell them about it and let you present the certificate. So with that, I'll hand it over to Yvonne and Richard.
Okay.
Good evening, King George County School Board. Thank you very much for allowing us to present tonight. And I would just like to say that our selection this year was very difficult. We had some very, very highly qualified applicants. And if we could send everybody, we would love to do that. But unfortunately, that was not an option for us. So we had to pick our top 2 candidates. But tonight we would like to recognize all of the students who applied for Space Camp. Not all of them are able to be here tonight, but we still would like to recognize them publicly in front of the board. And if you are a student who is here, when you hear your name, please come forward. We have Nadia Ashton. I think so. Bailey Dellier. Aiden Lucas. Madsen Neprosh. Samantha Moore. Peyton Redding. Joseph Toro. Michael Toro. Caden Waldy. Sarah Zook. And our last 2 applicants were our 2 winners selected. We have Sydney Landreth. And Lindsay Hawthorne. Everybody in. Again, thank you to the school board for allowing us to recognize these amazing scholars. We have some really amazing students who are really destined to do some amazing things. And also thank you to the King George Education Foundation for funding the 2 scholarships. And hopefully maybe some more donors will be interested in helping to send some more students in years to come. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Richard. And thank you to the Bradshaws and the Harrisons for your generous contribution, and congratulations to both Sydney and Lindsay. I have a friend whose wife just sent him to summer camp for his 40th birthday. Had a blast, so you're way ahead of him. Okay, moving on. We will now open the floor to public comment. Mr. Rinko, you said we do not have any. Okay, all right. Did anyone intend to make public comment who failed to sign up? Okay. And I believe, Mr. Vance, said I see one comment online. Okay. Ms. Rachel Scott, you're with us.
Hello. My name is Rachel Scott, and my daughter is in 1st grade at King George Elementary. Tonight, I ask that the board remove the mask requirement and allow parents and teachers and staff the option for opting out of the mask. Within the last week and a half, Scott Gottlieb, who was the former FDA commissioner and is currently a Pfizer executive, said cloth masks aren't going to provide a lot of protection. That's the bottom line. This is an airborne illness. We now understand that, and a cloth mask is not going to protect you from a virus that spreads through airborne transmission. Public officials are starting to acknowledge that cloth masks don't do anything. And Youngkin has said that he plans to remove the executive order requiring this for students. He is going to be inaugurated on Saturday. I ask that the board not make the students wait any longer than they have to. Even if Youngkin doesn't remove that order, I ask that the school board quit allowing politicians to harm our children. Thank you.
Ms. Scott. All right, Mr. Rand. Is there anyone else online? Do we have any changes to the agenda this evening?
Madam Chair, we just asked that we be able to bring back the minutes that are listed on your consent agenda. We have one minor change we want to make to those before we ask that you approve them.
Okay, certainly. We're gonna just remove the consent agenda this evening, right? Yes. So we don't know where that's coming from?
Want to put it on the record?
What? Yeah, so is someone not muted? All right. Okay, we'll move on to our discussion items. So first this evening, on our agenda to discuss, we have some policy manual updates. So I will walk through them. If anyone has any comments to address, please bring them up. For those of you who are, for our new members, we typically walk through these. We discuss if there are any changes, and then they return to us at the following meeting for approval. We can certainly, that can change if there are additional requests that need to be made. But first up this evening, we will have policy AF, our comprehensive plan. Anyone have any comments or questions about that?
Yeah, there's some clear mistakes with the comprehensive plan edits. For instance, the first sentence strikes out the only verb in that sentence and doesn't replace it with anything. So I understand these changes all came from VSBA. So if we see problems, we just send it back to them with our comments to get them corrected, or what would be the best way to do that?
Yes, I thank you, Mr. Rolls. I too noticed there's an obvious omission of a verb in that first sentence. So I will contact Ms. Ewing with any questions you have about any of these for you and get you the responses as soon as I get them.
I have some further comments on that section. Would you like them now or? Okay. Yeah, that first sentence, I just find it to be convoluted and not very well constructed. So I'd like to see that reworked. Probably the first sentence needs to become 2 sentences. I don't know that we necessarily want to go through it word by word right now, unless now would be the time.
No, I can give her that feedback generally, but she offers these to school boards such as ours who subscribe to the service. I could certainly, if there's recommended language you want to propose, I can ask her if any reason it substantively changes the what she has put in there. But beyond that, that's where it falls. It's her style. It's in her writing, but she does make sure she captures the statutory requirements for you. That said, if you'd like to make a recommendation back to her, I'm happy to forward that on your behalf.
Yeah.
We don't need to necessarily wordsmith here. I mean, we could, if you want to send proposed changes, then I'm happy to forward that to her for you.
All right, any further comments or questions on the comprehensive plan policy? No? All right, we'll move on. Policy BCA, school board organizational meeting. So actually, I would, I'll offer for this, this is maybe more of a philosophical discussion, but so I do recall at the VSBA conference this year, having attended, or to say the end of last year, just attending a number of school sessions on board policy, board culture, that sort of thing. And there are school boards who hold their organizational meetings in, say, July before the beginning of the school year, which would allow the board to align with the calendar, the school calendar year, more so than the calendar, the true calendar year. So wondering if any of my colleagues had thoughts on that. I think it might align, instead of having this, juncture in the middle of the year, it might align well for things such as doing the superintendent's evaluation, that sort of thing. Anyway, does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Madam Chair,
Dr. Cartwright.
I'm in agreement that we should probably meet in July as a school board to organize our agendas and to evaluate the school superintendent, and to, instead of doing this type of thing in the middle of the year.
Okay, so I guess I didn't, maybe I misspoke. I didn't mean to intend that at the same meeting as the superintendent evaluation, just it would align our board operation with that of the school year, basically is where I was going with that. But okay, thank you, Dr. Cartwright.
Madam Chair, if we do something like that, I would ask that because of schedules, and especially with some of us, maybe we have plans way ahead of time, that we make sure very early on that we have an exact date so that we can make those.
Certainly. I would think, obviously, if we were to make a change of that nature, we would have to adopt a calendar and then have an organizational meeting in the mid-year, and then, you'd have like a 6-month stint. We could, if we did such a thing, I would imagine you could stick to the calendar that was already agreed upon, right? At that point in time, you could designate a meeting in July to be your next organizational meeting, and then you would project another year out.
So Madam Chair, are you saying that that wouldn't be for this year? It would be looking at subsequent years?
It could be. It was more of, like I said, a philosophical thing, if we thought that was something that as a board we might be interested in.
It makes sense to me, but for you having been on the board for, 2 years now, do you think that would you recommend that?
I mean, I do, which is why I brought it up. I thought it made sense. Obviously the board has functioned this way for some time as well. It was just, obviously there are other boards do have a lot to offer. So I think in particular, one of the sessions that I attended, I believe Ms. Hawk was there as well, was on master boards. So there are with your board, evolution and professional development to learn how to operate very efficiently as a board, and they had panel members from boards who have gone through this with VSBA, and some of their, they talk about things that work for their board and things that don't, and one of theirs was one of the boards, I forget specifically which one it was, they have the organizational meetings in the summer before school kicks off. So I thought that was of note.
Madam Chair, I'd like to recommend that maybe in March, we actually make a decision about this and actually maybe look at a date and make a motion if we could put that on the agenda.
I'm fine with that. Anyway.
My question, I guess, is, does the VSBA need to, my memory is that was a purely local decision. And I don't know why VSBA would have any input, but Dr. Benson, do you know whether or not we need to run that through VSBA?
No, your policy, if adopted at the next meeting, would simply require an annual meeting. You could hold that whenever you all chose to hold it.
Okay, so we could recommend that we remove the January, the specific month.
Be held annually, and then we can evaluate.
Say the meeting will be held annually.
Oh, sorry.
So Dr. Benson, could you, I guess if you are going to make review other items or policies with Ms. Ewing, could you check on that one as well? Okay, great. Thank you. All right, without further ado, moving on to policy BDD, electronic participation in meetings from remote locations. Any questions or comments? So I would say it looks to me like the change is an increase in the number of personal meetings that can be attended for personal matters, correct? So previously it was 2 meetings per year and now it's 2 or 25% of the meetings held per calendar year. So obviously that increases the number of meetings that board members can attend remotely for personal reasons. Yeah. Clarifying, makes sense to me. Okay, policy CBA, qualifications and duties for the superintendent. Questions or comments? If not, moving on to policy CBG, which is evaluation of the superintendent. Questions or comments?
Yeah, I had a, Madam Chair.
Mr. Bush?
First of all, the annual evaluation is usually when? I'm sorry to be so ignorant about some of this. When is the annual evaluation of the superintendent?
So last year we completed it in July. I believe previously it's been done earlier than that. Dr. Benson, do you recall?
It's usually either, it's been, generally it's been spring or summer, you know, the May to July timeframe.
Okay. That second question is, I'm just wondering, so often in evaluation of the superintendent, it includes, since we have a comprehensive plan, usually your evaluation also is representative to the how well that comprehensive plan was accomplished for that particular year. I just don't see anything in here about aligning your evaluation with the comprehensive plan. I'd like to suggest or even make a motion that it be included in here, your evaluation in reference to the success of the comprehensive plan.
So I guess Dr. Benson, if we were to make a change of that nature, I don't know. So typically we can, when we do the superintendent evaluation, we certainly, I mean, it is up to us as a board to determine that evaluation, right? So at that time, that's, you know, I mean, we can discuss what exactly we are evaluating and it could be addressed in that fashion. But if we wanted to add it to the policy, I don't know that that's a major issue either.
But I don't know if it would be, I was trying to remember, the instrument itself, you know, has 7 different categories and may then refer to. So it may be helpful to the board to see the instrument itself and perhaps.
Yes. And I apologize, Dan. I'd like to see the instrument.
Yeah, that might help.
That would make, yes.
Questions.
I'm accustomed to seeing a relationship between the evaluation of the superintendent with a comprehensive plan for the division, and I just didn't see that here.
Let me send you the instrument itself,
Okay.
and that may be because the policy is just more broadly written, that's all.
Good, thank you.
All right, any other comments? Feedback on that policy? Okay.
I'm sorry, are you going to send that to us by email, Dr. Benson?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. If there's no further discussion on our policy manual updates. All right, we will move on to board procedures this evening. Dr. Benson, did you want to comment on that discussion item as an opener?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just tried to, given the uniqueness of this meeting, since there is we're absent a formal chair for this early January timeframe, 2 members had contacted me about the want to just discuss generally 2 topics related to, and the board procedures is my language just to try to capture these 2 topics, that's all. So I believe, don't mean to put you either in your spot, but I know that Mr. Rolls and I spoke about the public comment, you know, some of the procedurally, you know, is it necessary as far as a public commenter to state where they live, or could they simply state their role in our community to make sure that they have standing? And certainly that's just more of a procedural matter for the board to adopt, I guess. And Mr. Rolls, if you want to expand on that, please do.
Sure. I just think that community involvement is very important. We want people to be feel free to come and speak up, and it may be a deterrent for some to reveal their home address. And I don't know if necessarily necessary for them to do that. We want, of course, to ensure that people are King George residents. So I would propose that they check in with the clerk, prove their King George residency, and then once they do that, probably ask them to only state their name and their district, just for our awareness of whereabouts they are. No need to say their specific home address. Especially you think about teachers wanting to maybe come and give comment. I mean, it'd be one thing if it was just in front of all people here, but it goes out on the internet for anybody, anywhere to see any of their students or any of that. So that'd be my recommendation, to not require that home address be revealed.
Okay, so it could be, Dr. Benson, you're going to say something?
The only thing I would add to that is for a staff member who may not reside and be in a district or magisterial district for one of you, if they just state their role, so they have a connection to the school division as a stakeholder. That would be the, just to add on.
Okay. Any other discussion on that feedback? Ms. Hawk, do you have any feedback?
No, my only concern is whether there's any statutory backing to that.
Not that I found, as far as stating a name and an address, at least of residence.
Yeah.
I think the whole purpose is simply for the board to make sure that a public commenter has standing that's germane to the board business. In other words, is a resident or is a parent or a family member, or is a student or is a staff member.
Okay. So they would need to establish a standing.
For you all, that's all. But I don't think that, I agree with Mr. Rolls. I don't think that requires that they reveal their home address.
Right. I mean, I certainly am in agreement with that. I just want to make sure we're dotting all the i's and crossing the t's.
I'm also in total agreement that to respect the privacy of people that say something, because we've all seen it where somebody could say something that's contentious for someone else and they hear their home address. It's just so valuable to allow them to speak and make comments, but not necessarily to divulge any personal information such as their home address or phone numbers.
All right, Dr. Cartwright, any comment?
I'm in agreement as well.
Okay, thank you. I have no issues with that. I know I previously, since we have gotten some questions this past year about public comment in the process, I know I was digging through some of the statutes, trying to figure out if there was a requirement for that as well. And I also didn't find any, not that I'm a legal genius by any stretch of the imagination, but I would recommend, yes, so name, role, I guess, or relation to the school board and then the district, Chuck Slivin, because I know a lot of times constituents do expect us to, like, their representative to be representative of them, and it helps to know which districts folks are from. That'd be my suggestion, but I'm in favor of it.
So, a question for that: is there an appropriate place to document that? I mean, it's not quite at the policy level, so it wouldn't become a policy, right? Might be bylaws if we were to bylaws at some point.
You asking if it's procedure or policy? Is that what you're saying?
Like how I mean, talk about here be in the minutes, but it's good to have it documented somewhere. I'm wondering where would be appropriate.
Yeah, so I think in the minutes would be the first place it would be documented. We don't, to my knowledge, have it documented anywhere that our public comment policy is in fact that you state your name and your address. So I think we could make that change. We could adopt it. And I know there's been discussion, I think a desire to hopefully establish some bylaws this year, and we could capture all those sorts of things in them, I would think.
That'd be a good idea.
So
That's a good idea.
does that work? Okay, Mr. Rolls, so I'm happy to implement that at our next meeting unless there's objection.
So
And we
a
can-
motion needed.
We can make a motion if you want, or we can all agree to do it.
Would you like simply a regulation that would accompany a policy that could memorialize that? I guess, a regulation is something that you all can approve as a board to support the implementation of a policy. So I'd have to see what our policy states as far as public comment, or if we have one that's germane to just public comment. But we could find a best fit policy, maybe just draft a brief regulation that would
Address that.
record what you all have come to consensus about tonight, and then you could bring it at a future meeting. You could approve that regulation, and then it would be part of your policy manual and in writing then. That would be one way to go about it.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea to me. Is that something we could, you could come back to us with next week?
Sure.
Great. Not next week, our next meeting, sorry.
In 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay. All right, anything else, Mr. Rolls?
No.
That was good. Okay. All right. And
The
so,
other, Madam Chair, I did not speak with Mr. Bush, but I do know through Cheryl, I guess, who spoke with Ms. Bushrod, he wanted to discuss Robert's Rules of Order.
Right.
So I'll leave it to you.
I know that's been assumed, as I read through documents, you even mentioned it earlier, Ms. Gonzalez, about there's an assumption that we kind of generally follow the Robert's Rules of Order, but it's never written down anywhere that it's actually part in our policy or in our bylaws. And I would like to submit or that we make it more than just an assumption or that we generally follow it, that we specifically follow the Robert's Rules of Order. And I know it's a 700-page document looking at the whole thing. Most everybody here, I think, has a copy of this shortened version, which really is the enough showing the procedures of Robert's Rules of Order. And I would like to recommend that we follow this entire shortened versions of the Robert's Rules of Order. But if that's a little too much and we need to take time, then at least there's about 10 pages, pages 19 in this through 37, I think it is, that talks generally about the motions and about the debates. And I guess I would like to make it official that we will adopt and follow the procedures outlined in Robert's Rules of Order concerning motions and debates of those motions. So I would like to make a motion that we actually adopt the motion and the debate portion of Robert's Rules of Order specifically outlined in this book in pages 19 through 37.
okay.
I second.
All right. Any further discussion?
I guess my concern only is about taking a portion of Robert's rules out and instead of adopting Robert's rules newly revised, this edition. Is there any reason why we would not adopt Robert's rules
Yeah,
as a whole?
I think that, well, there's some things in here to give you an example about that the secretary always reads the minutes and so on, and we don't do some of those things. And I guess that's my reason for pulling those two things out. However, Ms. Hawk, I do agree, and I would like to see that sometime before the end of this school year that we do adopt the entire Robert's Rules or something similar, Rules of Order, with changes that would not fit with this division. But for the time being, those two areas fit with our division very nicely. So that was the reason for pulling those out. But I agree that at some future date, I would like to implement the entire Robert's Rules of Order with changes that conflict with our particular division.
Madam Chair,
Dr. Cartwright?
we are already implementing most of Robert's rules, and I'm just going to briefly go through what they are. It's to make a motion. So a member raises or rises a hand signal. We don't do that, but we make a motion to the chairperson. Second, another person second the motion. Then you restate the motion, then you debate or discuss, and you vote. And then the chairperson just announces the vote and restates that again. So Robert's Rules is just basically to keep the agenda moving with the group and to establish your goals. Basically not allowing anyone to speak a second time, to keep discussions on track. So, and to keep the group again on the agenda. So that's what I see as part of Robert's Rules.
Okay, Mr. Rolls, any discussion to add?
I agree with all that, that if you look at the front cover, it says in 30 minutes you can have the basics. So we don't need to know the whole thing before we can use what's useful.
Certainly, and I tend to agree, along with what Dr. Cartwright said. I mean, we do ordinarily, we adhere to most of it as it is, but certainly not a bad idea to adopt it more formally. I have no objections. So.
To what?
Oh, so the portion is fine. I mean, it is 2 chapters if we did, and if we revisit it at a later date. I'm fine with that too.
So you're agreeing to my motion, at least for the question is that motion is to adopt the Robert's Rules of Order, the motion and the debate section, which is outlined in this particular area on pages 19 through 37.
Yes.
And I second.
Okay. So any further discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. All right. So next up, we have our information items, beginning with committee reports this evening. So there may not be many of us with committee reports, but there may be a few. So Mr. Bush, I assume you don't have any committee reports yet?
No, not yet.
Ms. Hogg?
No, I do not.
Okay, Dr. Cutright?
Due to the holiday, I do not have a committee report. However, the SEAC committee meeting is tomorrow afternoon at 5 p.m. at the board office, and also online for parents as well.
Okay, great. Look forward to hearing about that at our next meeting. So I actually have two committee reports. My committees were like gung-ho and knock them out in 2 days before the holidays. So the Title I Advisory Committee meeting was held on the 13th of December. Provided a number of updates on the number of students receiving services at each of our schools, or at each of our elementary schools, the notification procedures for Target Assist, and discussed some of the intervention services that are currently taking place in our schools. So a few of the current intervention services include software programs in both reading and math, daily small groups, Camp Excel, and then of note, which I found interesting, was that a number of the schools have started using some of the summer school materials that have been provided. They started using those this year to supplement some of the other material, and apparently that's worked really well. So I thought that was a very good, resourceful approach. They also gave an overview on the latest family involvement events. So the virtual Title I Math Night was held on October 28th. And then both King George Elementary and Potomac also held curbside winter events, where they were planning to the week before the holidays. So King George was holding one the last week of school. Families could drive through, pick up some materials, and they were creatively playing, I think, chorus or band music over the radio, so parents could listen in the car while they were picking up their supplies. I thought that was a really good idea. Potomac also was planning a curbside event the last week of December. They were going to do a drive-through with books and math activities for students, and coupons for kids' meals from Subway. And Sealston was planning their future events, including, I think, looking at incorporating the One Book, One School program or effort, where basically I think everybody reads like a chapter a day. And they did know some of the issues right now that they have seen are where some kids can't participate in the program or in some of the events, I guess, after schools, because we don't have enough bus drivers to get them door to door. They can only pick up at the bus stops instead of going door to door, which is more uniquely tailored to the families that are attending those events. So that's unfortunate. I know it sounded like they really do their best to try to coordinate rides and get the kids there and get them home. So that was good. And then the Technology Advisory Committee met on the 14th of December. They, actually both the Title I Advisory Committee, that was Ms. Harris's first meeting. She did an excellent job. And the Technology Advisory Committee was Ms. Half's first advisory committee meeting as well. So it was great to see the two of them in action. So Ms. Half gave an overview of the technology department's response to the pandemic and some of the summer device recovery efforts last year before school, getting the Chromebooks back from students, that sort of thing. Gave an update on the current one-to-one device status at the secondary level. So teachers, sounds like at this time, all have one desktop in each classroom and one staff Chromebook per employee. And so the 2022 second semester initiative is trying to transition the secondary teacher devices from desktops to laptops. So not to Chromebooks, but to laptops. And so with an ultimate goal of eventually transitioning all three of the elementary schools to 1-to-1 ratio using the classroom carts. They're updating the technology 5-year plan, which hopefully will get incorporated into the strategic plan update. And they're also reviewing the new digital learning standards, which I guess are apparently actually VDOE standards from 2020 that are in place that we've been looking at, and they're going to want to really place emphasis on how to deploy these smartly to teachers and not further overwhelm them with all of the standards that they currently have to meet anyway. And then in general, there was a lot of really good discussion on what the new moves and the digital literacy and digital citizenship, getting that understanding to our young learners And also consideration of things like keyboard literacy for young students, which I thought it's interesting. I know I have 2 little kids at home, so that's certainly of interest to me. So those were some good updates from both the Tech Advisory Committee and Title I. And our next meetings, I believe, are in February. So, and that is all I have. So moving on to our budget timeline. Dr. Benson?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. So the season is upon us, or has been upon us really for a month, where we are charged with creating a fiscal year budget for FY23. It's my responsibility to bring to you as a school board a budget of need, which I will certainly do, but to do so, we engage in a process. We simply don't go in a room, close the door, and put together a budget and bring it to you. So that process, to deploy that process, I bring to you per policy a proposed timeline for your consideration and for the public to understand what is going on as we develop the budget. So in the packet, you've got a handout which just outlines by month the benchmark events that occur. So you can see in December, and I included the school board, I believe you had an opportunity to provide input through the annual staff survey, which we send out, or I send out to staff asking for their input. Next meeting, I'll bring to you the responses, and I'll bring to you the commentary that we received for this next budget cycle. We use that survey to gauge the effectiveness of the previous year's budget, given the questions that we'll review, and also to inform our planning process for the next year. I'll share that those results are shared with department heads, with principals, so that they can see the input. It's just one source, another source of input that staff can provide to help us craft a budget that meets the needs as clearly as we can possibly define. So we move into January, and one step added this January is that we are now to the point where we have worked with a consultant that was introduced to the board back in the fall. That person has worked with a steering committee of 40 plus members or so, to draft, and again, it's just a draft, an initial draft, a comprehensive plan for this board's consideration for public posting, for input from the public, so that eventually this board can approve the next iteration of our comprehensive plan. But that's one step in this process we've added, because we want certainly that to be a guiding source of information for budgetary decisions moving forward. So you'll see that listed right there. Tonight you have a hard copy, I believe, that was distributed to you of that draft, and tomorrow we will post that to our website for the public, so that they can make comment as they want to, or give input specific to that. So it's not just buried in the board packet, it's actually out front on the website for people to see and comment on. So that's one step. And then also in January, I have this morning, or actually beginning yesterday afternoon, traveled to Richmond. I'm meeting with other superintendents and other financial managers from across the state. We have folks that are presenting to us, giving us data, prospective data on next year's revenue forecast and other variables that will be in play for budget development for the upcoming year. So I'll be headed back after this meeting tonight to attend again tomorrow. I also wanted to highlight that annually principals and department heads use a homegrown tool. We call it the Budget Builder. This is really a spreadsheet that is categorized or codified by expenditure code, but also asks department heads and schools to then plan expenditures for the next year. So they basically then utilize whatever a school process for gathering department heads, if it may involve that, or grade level chairs, to clearly define how much are we requesting for this next year. And they record those in this document. It's called a Budget Builder. Again, it's an Excel spreadsheet. It's shareable. Everybody can see it. So it helps us to communicate. If a school is planning expenditures for paperbacks, for novels, or whatever it may be, we don't duplicate that kind of request in the budget with the instruction department. So it's a communication tool. It's also a great deal of transparency, because every every penny, then you can look in the budget builder for stuff, for materials, supplies, that type of thing. It does not include personnel. The personnel will be in another document that'll be part of the budget. But anyway, this is a useful tool, and we invest a good bit of time in making sure that our planned expenditures for next year are prudent and appropriate. And we take, the funds that are afforded to us, we take those very seriously. We want to be good stewards of our taxpayers' funds to support education and make sure we're really focusing them on what is needed. And that document, that process really, that ultimately yields a document is very helpful to us. I also receive preliminary guidance from you, particularly when it comes to employee wages. So I can tell you that right now the federal COLA recommended is at 5.9%. We usually tie to the federal COLA. So if we began draft one with the federal COLA of a 5.9 plus a step increase for employees, those employees eligible for a step increase, that is my plan at this point, to bring you a draft budget, draft one with the 5.9 to keep pace with inflation, and then the step increase that employees have earned because of their longevity so that we can retain employees. So a 7.9 total in most cases. Some of our steps right now have some compression, are not quite 2%, and we'd like to address that in the coming years. But for now, at least, generally between 7 and 7.9 would be the kind of the median or the range as far as employee compensation increase for next year. I will tell you the governor's proposed budget, Governor Northam's proposed budget was out or has been out since mid-December. And in that proposal, the governor's made a recommendation for a 10% over 2 years. So 5% and a 5% over the 2-year biennium. I'll say it now for the first time, I'll say it many times through the budgeting process, that the state funding then, when they propose that, covers the SOQ predicated positions in the budget, and that there is definitely a local match. So what is proposed at the state level, if adopted locally, does require a local match to make whole the increase. And we'll get into more, I'll portray that more specifically when that draft one comes to you all and to our public. So with that said, unless there's an objection, I will begin draft one with that as the proposed employee increase. Again, that's all this is open for your input as a board. In February then, well, I'll present the staff survey before February, but February is typically when we invite our professional organizations, both VPE and KGEA. Their representatives can come present to the board with their direction as far as their membership and what they would like to see, particularly with regard to compensation in the budget. And then we put it together. We give you that preliminary draft one of the FY 22-23 budget. From there, then you as a board, I help you to monitor what's going on at the state level. And this year, I can tell you already, there is a good deal of discretionary funding that the General Assembly will have to address whatever they choose to address. Early on, I've mentioned the governor's proposal as far as compensation increases for teachers and for school employees. But what happens, and this is what happens, is we have the governor's proposed budget now. We will soon get any adjustments to that the incoming governor-elect Youngkin wants to make. And then both houses in the General Assembly will create their own budget bill. So they'll have their own priorities. The House of Representatives, the Senate, they will build 2 separate budgets. And then at crossover, those budgets will go to the other houses. Typically, each house rejects the other's budget. And then before they depart, which I think this year is March 16th, maybe. I think it goes from January 16th to March 16th. Before they depart, they will put together a committee representative of both houses. And that committee then works through the compromises or the final draft that the General Assembly then will consider and adopt to forward to the governor. And then of course the governor can make proposed changes if he chooses to send it back for approval. So I say all of that to let you know that the spring is a very fluid time in terms of revenue. So we'll build a budget and we'll balance that to the revenue figures we have, which will most likely be the governor's proposed budget. Those revenue numbers are likely to change from the state And accordingly then, if they go up or they go down, accordingly then the local funds requested to make our budget whole will adjust as well. So it's, it's a fairly tricky process, but this board has done well, and I know you've worked well with the board of supervisors of the county as far as the local side with funding, and we'll need to do the very same thing this year. But that's February and that's March. During that time period, particularly when feedback is obtained back from the board of supervisors, this school board then usually schedules work sessions to then refine and bring the budget into balance. And then ultimately we have, we bring it to conclusion in April or early May in time for the next fiscal year for your final approval. So in a nutshell, for our public, that's the proposed timeline for this coming year, very similar to one we've used in previous years. Those are kind of the key benchmark events during the budget process that I've outlined. And my appreciation goes to not only the 40 members of our comprehensive plan committee who've been working for several months, but also all the department heads, all the staff for their input and their part in the process of developing next year's budget. So with that, I'll stop and be happy to entertain any questions that you may have for now.
Thank you, Dr. Benson.
You're welcome.
Any questions on the budget timeline?
I just have one, and it concerns at the time that you present this to the Board of Supervisors in March, do they have, I attended the one meeting of Board of Supervisors and I was listening as they were talking about the budget that the division had presented them and, and their reflections on whether they were going to approve it and what they cut and so on. Are we given any criteria that the Board of Supervisors uses when they make a decision about our budget?
That's for me.
Yes, it is to you. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I don't mean this critically. I've not received like a predetermined criteria necessarily.
Okay.
But always the feedback is prudent that we get from the Board of Supervisors. And we recognize, or I recognize, that there are, they have a difficult job because they have to address all of the local services. They have to create one budget that is inclusive of not only the schools, but fire and rescue, the sheriff, Parks and Rec, all of these other entities who have needs as well for our community. So Virginia is unique in that it is a state local partnership to fund the school division. And so it does require kind of some back and forth. But to answer your question, no, I've not known, at least in my 10 years, of predetermined criteria necessarily. And I think that's a good thing because I don't think the Board of Supervisors, I think they're very respectful of your swim lane as a school board, that you all then are responsible for crafting it. We present it to them for their feedback and their consideration more so than just feedback. I have had that perspective where they've been very respectful of we create or we determine the amount of local effort we can afford. We let you know that. And then as a school board, you have the job of making that balance. You know best where your priorities are with your constituents. You have a process that you employ, develop a budget so that the school board can then go back and balance, make cuts as needed typically, although fingers crossed, maybe this is a good year, we don't have to make cuts. They can fully fund our request. But that's typically the process.
Okay, I have some more thoughts on that, but we'll wait till we get closer to it, I guess. Thank you.
All right, any further comments, questions for Dr. Benson? All right, we'll move on to our superintendent's report. If Dr. Benson, you have anything else for us?
No, that's really it. I just want to make sure that you understood that I've got a hard copy of the comprehensive plan to you. I wanted you all to have that first. And again, this is now to the point where we're ready to accept input. And we're going to publish this for our community on our website, and we'll give them an opportunity to comment back any input that they want to have, and certainly for you all as well as the school board. Prior to approving it, we'll need to have a public hearing, which will be another forum for input. But again, it's draft one. Greatly appreciate all the work that has gone into this for draft one, and we've invited Dr. Gaston to come at the second meeting of this month to kind of walk through it for you. And so he'll be here at your next meeting to walk through it with you. Okay.
All right, thank you. I'm looking forward to that. Okay, we'll move on to board comment. Mr. Bush. you have any comments this evening?
No, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Hawk?
I certainly do have comments, as always. I want to welcome our new board members and express my thanks to them for coming forward, and putting in the effort to not only do the election, but to continue and show up. And it's not always an easy task, but I commend you all for doing it. So, and I'm looking forward to working together as a board. The only other comment I have is that we got a notice that from the Virginia Department of Education that the public comment period is open currently for the proposed data science standards of learning and curriculum framework. And if you wish to look at it further, you can go to the Department of Education website, and under Superintendent's Memos 334-21, you can really see how the standards of learning model works, and how the curriculum gets set. We certainly don't set a curriculum at the local level. Virginia uses the standards of learning and then develops a curriculum out of that. But it's always, each section is open for public comment. And so the data science standards of learning webpage is open for public comments, and the date is from December 17th, 2021 to January 31, 2022. And it describes very accurately both the mathematics portion and the literacy instruction development in terms of data science. So I thought that was an interesting opportunity for folks to see how a curriculum gets developed in the state of Virginia. That's all.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hawk. Dr. Cutright?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would also like to welcome my two colleagues, Mr. Bush and Mr. Rolls. I think it's going to be an exciting board experience for the two of you, and we welcome your input. I'd also like to congratulate the King George Education Foundation and the two applicants for the Space Camp. It's so important that we have students that are involved with STEM and science projects. Also, I noticed when I was on the website today with the King George Educational Foundation that this is a Principal Appreciation Week. So we need to send out our appreciation to all of our principals that work very hard in our various schools. And last but not least, I'd like to say that I'm looking forward to working with the budget, and I'm looking forward to input from my constituents from the James Madison District, staff and students as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cutright. Mr. Rolls?
I'd also like to show my appreciation for the King George Educational Foundation. I've seen them in multiple meetings coming and doing many things to enhance our students' education. The extra resources they bring to bear is wonderful. Space Camp, that's something that inspired me as a kid, that got me interested in STEM for sure. So that's great to see today. And again, congratulations to the two winners. And thank you for the welcome. Warm welcome, Mrs. Hawk and Dr. Cutright. Definitely very excited to be here and excited about this opportunity. I'm very optimistic about everything that I think we'll be able to accomplish in our years together here. I know this is a great group. I'm looking forward to working with you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rolls. And I would like to, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, also welcome Mr. Bush and Mr. Rolls to the board. Certainly an undertaking to commit your time to the board, so I certainly appreciate your dedication and commitment to doing so. I look forward to this year. I think we will be able to accomplish some good things. I think we already have at this meeting, and I think that's a great first step. And beyond that, I'd like to say thank you. I hope everyone had a happy holidays. Thank you, patience to all of our staff and bus drivers and students and families and everyone for persevering through the last week of craziness with the weather. I hope everyone hopefully has their power back by now. It was certainly a trying week, I think, for all involved. So anyway, hopefully 2022 take two can maybe start this week. And anyway, look forward to the year. So thank you. Happy New Year. All right. Do we have a motion to go into closed session?
Pursuant to State Code Section 2.2-3711.A.1, for the purpose of discussion, consideration of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, and resignation of employees of the school board, I move that we go into closed meeting.
We have a second.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We're now in closed session. Okay, do we have a motion to return to open session?
I move that the King George County School Board return to open session and certify that pursuant to State Code 2.2-3712.d, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements under this chapter and only such business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened and were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the public body.
Second,
And certify.
and certify, I'm sorry.
Mr. Bush? Do you certify?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Mr. Rolls?
Certify.
All right, I certify as well. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We're now in open session. Do we have a motion to approve the action resulting from closed session?
I move that we approve the actions of the closed session tonight as presented.
Do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We have a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We're now adjourned until January 24th.